He's going to kill me. Daddy. The scream shattered the stillness of the Texas night, followed by fists hammering my front door like a battering ram. I stumbled out of bed, heart slamming, the clock's red digits burning 3:01 a.m. into my brain. 30 years as Dallas County Sheriff had taught me one thing: nothing good comes knocking at this hour. The pounding grew frantic. Not a knock, not a call for help, a demand, a plea. I threw the deadbolt, yanked the chain free, and pulled the door wide, and my world cracked open. Hannah, my daughter, stood on the porch, her eyes swollen shut, her throat marked with 5 perfect bruises, fingerprints burned into her skin, her dress ripped down the shoulder, blood drying on her lip. Derek, she gasped, because of Leah. He hit me because of her. She collapsed into my arms. For a second, I couldn't breathe. My baby girl smelled of fear and cheap perfume, nothing like her. Rage burned through me so hot I thought my skin might split. I stared at her, forced her into a chair, pressed ice to her face with hands that shook like I was a rookie again. My phone's flash burst across the kitchen as I took photo after photo. Evidence. Proof. The start of something bigger. Daddy, what are you doing? She whispered. Documenting, I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded like steel. She looked up at me with her one good eye. Shame, pain, defeat. What are you thinking? I thought of the little girl who used to twirl in Sunday dresses. The teenager rolling her eyes at my overprotective rules. The bride who once whispered, "Do you think he really loves me?" And I said the only words that mattered. I'm thinking Derek Hale just made the biggest mistake of his life. And this time, the law is on our side. If you're watching this, subscribe and comment where you're watching from. If that sounds harsh, here's how we got there. The kitchen clock ticked loud in the silence, each second stretching out longer than it should. I sat across from Hannah, the ice pack pressed against her face, her fingers trembling as she held onto it like it was the only solid thing in her world. And me? I was trying to breathe. Just breathe. 30 years in uniform. I'd seen blood on sidewalks, fights in dark alleys, mothers begging me to bring their children home. But nothing prepared me for the sight of my own daughter broken and whispering that her husband put his hands on her. I kept my voice calm. My training demanded it. But inside, my chest was a wildfire. You've got to understand, she said softly, staring down at the table. He wasn't always like this. It started small. A comment, a look, a little control. And I kept telling myself it would get better. Her words cut because I'd heard them before, out of other women's mouths, across interrogation tables, in late-night interviews. But hearing them here, in my kitchen, from my little girl, it was like swallowing glass. The refrigerator hummed behind me, steady and indifferent, as if the whole world didn't just tilt off its axis. The smell of old coffee lingered in the air. My robe hung loose on my shoulders, and suddenly I felt every one of my 62 years pressing down hard. My misbelief had always been simple, that keeping the peace was safer than starting a fight. That if I stayed quiet, if I let Hannah live her life without interference, she'd figure it out on her own. But watching her lift that ice pack to her face, bruises blooming like storm clouds under her skin, I knew silence to be my greatest sin. You warned me, didn't you? She whispered, finally looking at me. Her one good eye brimmed with tears. At the wedding, at the coffee shop, all those times, I didn't listen. And I didn't push hard enough. I said, my voice rough, I wanted to believe he'd change. Wanted you to believe it too. We sat there, guilt hanging between us like smoke. Hers for staying, mine for letting her. Two people who should have seen the truth years ago. Outside, a dog barked in the distance. Somewhere down the street, a car engine turned over, some early workers starting their day. Life kept moving. But hey, in this kitchen, time stood still. I leaned back in my chair, rubbed my hands over my face, and tried to think past the fury. I couldn't grab my gun and go. Not anymore. Not ever. That's not justice. That's not how I raised her, or myself. The law had rules, and for 30 years, I'd lived by them. Tonight, I would again. Hannah's voice broke through my thoughts. He's still at the house. With her. In our bed. The bile rose in my throat, but I forced it down. Force myself to focus. That's where this ends. Sweetheart. Right there. But not the way he expects. I thought about every case I'd ever built. The photos, the statements, the timelines, the little details juries can't ignore. Paperwork had won more fights than fists ever did. That's when it hit me. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't just a father tonight. I was still Raymond Cole, a man who knew exactly how to turn evidence into justice. I reached for a notepad from the drawer, flipped it open, and wrote down the date and time in bold strokes. August 2nd, 2022, 3:30 a.m. Then underlined it. Evidence begins here. Dad, Hannah's voice was small, but steady now. What happens next? I looked her in the eye, let her see the fire I'd been holding back for years, and told her the truth. We build the case. Step by step. By the book. And when I'm finished, your husband won't just lose his mistress. He'll lose everything he thought he could control. But the truth didn't start that night. It started years earlier. The past is a way of sneaking back in when you least want it. Sitting at that kitchen table, watching Hannah cradle an ice pack to her swollen face, I couldn't help but remember the first time I saw the cracks. It was June 7, 2014. Dallas was sweltering that summer, the kind of heat where asphalt shimmered and the air clung heavy to your skin. The wedding reception was at the Reunion Tower, 30 floors above the city, with floor-to-ceiling glass showing the skyline lit up like a jewel box. Hannah floated around in lace and silk, smiling that smile of hers that could melt steel. And right there at her side was Derek, looking sharp in a tailored suit, acting like the king of the room. Everyone said he was charming, perfect son-in-law material, educated, handsome, good job in logistics with a bright future. I wanted to believe them. Lord knows, I wanted my little girl happy. But I saw it. The subtle tells. When Hannah tried to thank the guests on the MIC, Derek cut her off mid-sentence. No, honey, that's not how it happened. Let me tell it better. He made it sound like a joke, smooth and polished, but I saw the flicker in her eyes. Embarrassed. Diminished. Later, at the head table, I noticed he ordered her meal without asking. She'll have the salad. Got to watch that figure. Everyone laughed politely. Hannah smiled too, but her cheeks flushed red. I told myself it was nerves. I told myself she'd speak up if it bothered her. The dance floor told a different story. When the DJ played Unforgettable, I had the honor of that father-daughter dance. Hannah leaned close, her hand trembling slightly on my shoulder, and whispered, Daddy, do you think he really loves me? Sometimes he's so controlling. My heart damn near stopped. This was the moment. She was asking for honesty, for me to give her permission to trust her doubts. And I blew it. I smiled, kept my voice calm, and said, Sweetheart, that's just pre-wedding jitters. Every man gets anxious. He'll settle down. She searched my face like she was begging me to say something else. But I didn't. I let her walk right back into his arms when the song ended. That was mistake number 1. Fast forward 11 months. April 2015. Hannah and I met at a small coffee shop in Oak Cliff called Murray Street Cafe. Brick walls, chalkboard menu, espresso machines humming. It was our regular spot by then. She walked in wearing a high-neck sweater even though it was pushing 80 degrees outside. How's married life? I asked, sliding her a latte. Good. Really good. But her eyes never met mine. We chatted about her teaching job, grading papers, her students. Then she mentioned how Derek thought her college friends were a bad influence. Said she should spend less time with them. That's not caring, Hannah, I told her. That control. She bristled. He sees things I don't. He just wants what's best for me. Her phone buzzed on the table. Once, twice, 3 times. She grabbed it quick, shoulders tightening with every vibration. I should go, she muttered. Coffee half finished. Smile forced, gone before I could push further. Mistake number 2. I let her walk out without pressing harder. Then came October 2016. Baby Jacob had just been born, 3 months old, and Hannah looked exhausted when she slid into our booth. Dark circles under her eyes, baggy sweatshirt, voice flat. Derek was criticizing her nonstop. The way she fed Jacob, the baby clothes she bought, her body after pregnancy. He just wants me to be my best, she insisted. But her hand shook when her phone buzzed. The moment she picked up, her tone shifted into something soft, apologetic. Yes, honey. No, just coffee. I'll be home soon. The call ended. She packed up fast, left her drink untouched. Mistake number 3. I didn't follow her out that door. By 2017, Jacob was walking. Hannah brought him along one afternoon, little toy car clutched in his chubby hand. She reached for a napkin, and her sleeve slid up just enough for me to see the bruise. Dark, finger-shaped. What happened to your arm? I asked. Too sharp. She froze. Yanked the sleeve down. I'm just clumsy lately, always bumping into things. Hannah, I said, lowering my voice. If he hit you, tell me now. Her eyes darted to Jacob. No, Derek would never. He just yells sometimes. Who doesn't yell? The lie sat heavy in the air. I wanted to drag the truth out, but I didn't. She grabbed Jacob, hurried out, and I let her go. Mistake number 4. Sitting in my kitchen years later, the clock pushing toward dawn, I replayed every one of those moments like a tape stuck on loop. The signs were all there, screaming at me, and I'd looked away. You asked me once if he loved you. I told Hannah. And I told you it was nerves. I was wrong. I should have trusted you. Should have acted. Her lip trembled. Tears slid down her cheek. And I should have listened to my gut. I ignored it every time. We sat in silence, 2 people bound together by shared guilt. But guilt wasn't going to save her now. Evidence would. Action would. Which brings us to the plan I should have made sooner. I sat at my kitchen table with the legal pad open and the clock ticking like a metronome. Paperwork had won more cases than fists ever did, and I was going to let paperwork do the heavy lifting tonight. First move, make it official. I called 911 while Hannah slept on the couch and asked for a domestic violence response at 5247 South Kenwood. A formal police report creates probable cause on paper. It starts a criminal track and gives us a record the prosecutor can use. Mike Donnelly knew the drill. I told him exactly what I had documented and where the photos were saved. He promised to respond through channels and to preserve the scene until evidence could be collected. Second move, medical documentation. I didn't argue with Hannah when she winced at the idea. Getting checked by a sane nurse at Parkland wasn't glamorous, but it makes a jury believe you. I scheduled the exam for that morning. The hospital would photograph injuries, swab for DNA, and produce a medical report that linked the bruises to assault and strangulation, critical for proving force and intent. Third move, preserve everything. Phones, texts, browser histories, clothing, receipts. I copied timestamp from the photos I'd taken, metadata intact. The torn strap, the dress fibers, the smear of blood on the dresser, all bagged and labeled. I wrote a chain of custody note for everything I touched. I told Hannah, don't wash anything. Preserve it. A judge and a jury love a tidy chain of proof. Fourth move, civil protection. In Texas, you can get an ex-parte family violence protective order the same day if the judge finds immediate danger. That order would bar Derek from the house and require him to stay 500 feet away. It also creates a separate legal consequence if he violates it. I put a timer on that. We would go to the Dallas County Courthouse before noon and ask the judge for temporary relief. Fifth move, the criminal timeline. Mike agreed to take the photos and my statement as an initial report. If probable cause existed, they detained Derek for questioning. Even if he invoked counsel, an arrest and a charging decision by the DA would follow the evidence. I called Sarah Chen. She'd prosecuted offenses like this before. I'd worked with her on mutual cases. I gave her the rundown and told her we wanted this pursued seriously. Sixth move, witnesses and corroboration. Neighbors had seen curtains twitch. Diane, if she cooperated, could be a witness to presence and interaction. I quietly noted who might help on paper and who needed careful handling. I wanted statements typed, dated, and signed. The prosecutor can do real damage with multiple corroborating notes, especially when those notes match timestamps and medical proof. Seventh move, leverage the escalation ladder. Private boundary, get Hannah to a safe place. Written notice, certified letter demanding he stay away. Police report and protective order, criminal enforcement and immediate safety. criminal charges, prosecution and possible conviction, civil follow-through, divorce filings, custody motions, asset freezes where applicable. Each step had paperwork, court forms, and a predictable timeline. That's where the law hums, predictable, boring, and effective. There were details to handle. Get an intake number from a hospital, a case number from the police, a judge's calendar slot for the ex-parte hearing, and secure copies of any photos or messages Hannah had kept. I scheduled a forensic exam within 7 to 2 hours and asked Mike to photograph the bedroom, take swabs, and log everything. I made notes about taxi receipts, credit card charges, and the possibility of a private investigator scan if Derek tried to flee. All legal, all documented. Most important, don't cross the line. I was a retired sheriff, not a vigilante. No confrontations, no threats, no getting even outside the law. If I let my temper lead, we'd lose credibility in court and with Hannah. The only way she got justice was by following the rules, every single one. I closed a notepad and felt a small, cold satisfaction. The plan was simple and surgical. Document, protect, press charges, and let the law dismantle his control. I told Hannah exactly that, in short sentences she could hold on to. Then the pushback started. For a few hours the plan hummed like a well-oiled machine. Police would document, medical would record, I would preserve every scrap of evidence. Then the world remembered how messy real people are, and the slow grind began. First, there was a paperwork dance. Mike and Rodriguez did everything right, but the DA's office asked for follow-ups, more precise timestamps, chain of custody affidavits, medical reports that hadn't arrived yet. Small, boring things that slow a case down. I sat in the prosecutor's office watching a calendar that moved like molasses. Time favored him, not us. Then came the digital problems. When we tried to pull log from Hannah's phone, some of the message threads were gone, swapped out, factory reset, all wiped. The metadata from a couple of photos was stripped clean. I felt that old cold knot in my gut. Someone had gone looking for holes to crawl through. Whoever had access to their accounts had covered tracks. Evidence that should have been rock became gravel. Public pressure arrived next, disguised as social concern. By noon, a handful of neighbors had already seen the squad car and were whispering. A small local blog, one I'd never heard of, ran a breathless piece. Local family drama, police involved. Comments piled up, and one of them was poisonous enough to sting. A fake screenshot of Hannah at a bar with another man, implying she'd been out late with lovers. The smear tasted of desperation. I knew the type. When threatened, people lash out where it hurts. Derek's first legal move was surgical and predictable. A high-priced attorney called Mike and me within 24 hours, all smooth assurances and threatening disclaimers. He wanted immediate access to the photos and demanded that any material procured improperly be excluded. He hinted at civil suits for defamation if anything leaked. That's the sort of lawyer who smells leverage and tries to suffocate a case with procedure. Hannah felt it all like a tidal wave. She kept retreating into silence between meetings with the prosecutor and the sane nurse. At night she'd wake and whisper, "What if this ruins everything for Alex and Lily?" Her shame almost pulled her back into the past, back into folding her life the way he wanted it. Each day I watched her courage bob like a candle flame in wind. One complication I hadn't fully expected: Derek wasn't alone. He had charm in spades and a small network through his job, vendors, a few church friends, a supervisor who owed him favors. A supplier called the district line asking if the Cole family drama might affect deliveries to the company. A neighbor texted that someone had placed a flyer with anonymous accusations on the block. The smear campaign was small and clumsy, but it was coordinated enough to worry me. Then a twist that made my stomach drop. While photographing files in their bedroom, Rodriguez found a hotel receipt tucked underneath a pile of bills. Different city, a 2-night stay last November. Derek's card use, Leah's initials scrawled on the receipt. Not the smoking gun, but a hard, physical thread that tracked this affair across time and place. It changed the gravity of what we knew. It pushed suspicion into the realm of proof. But the receipt brought a new problem. Derek's lawyer cried foul, chain of custody questioned, contamination alleged. He accused Rodriguez of planting evidence. For a heartbeat, the case looked fragile. Procedures matter. If a defense can paint investigators sloppy, juries are merciful to doubt. Complication piled on complication. Diane, who had been reluctant but cooperative at the scene, began to hem and haw in follow-up interviews. She confessed details one day, then said she didn't see everything the next, terror and confusion bleeding through. I could see the pressure, humiliation, fear of losing her job, guilt, maybe even threats. Human beings are complicated weapons in legal fights. My allies were steady but limited. Mike could push as far as the department allowed. Rodriguez was eager but only a patrol officer with no power to override a prosecution's calendar. Sarah Chen, the prosecutor, was fierce but overworked. She wanted high-confidence evidence because she'd seen cases collapse on technicalities before. I could feel the case negotiating its own life, not always in my favor. Money crept in too. Legal retainer demands, possible private forensics fees, childcare adjustments for Hannah while she attended interviews. Everything cost. We were not in a movie with an endless budget. The cost of justice in the real world is time and cash and nerves. And then one morning, when I checked the old detective's email folder, there was a message thread that made me pause. A series of calendar invites and terse emails between Derek and a company executive scheduling after-hours meetings and project reviews in places that matched some of Leah's claimed work trips. The pattern wasn't just romance. It suggested professional cover that could explain long times away, sudden cancellations, and someone else's willingness to look the other way. I'd thought the problem was simply an unfaithful husband and a cowardly accomplice. But the receipts, the emails, the sudden erasures in Hannah's phone said something bigger, something systemic. That's when I realized I'd been looking at the wrong problem. The turning point didn't come in a courtroom or with a neatly signed warrant. It came in the quiet of my study at 2 a.m., the desk lamp throwing yellow light across stacks of files, receipts, and scribbled notes. I had the hotel receipt in one hand, the email thread in the other, and a gut that told me this wasn't just an ugly marriage unraveling. This was bigger. Derek wasn't just cheating. He was covering something. And Leah, she wasn't just a mistress. She was complicit. I leaned back in my chair, rubbed my eyes, and thought like a detective I used to be. Motive, means, opportunity, patterns. The affair wasn't random. It was structured, recurring in the same hotels, same nights, under the guise of business trips. The emails hinted at more than romance. They used words like project scope, allocations, offshore transfer. Language too polished for pillow talk. I opened my old contact list again, scrolling past names of cops long retired, until I found one, Patrick Sloan. A cybercrimes investigator I'd worked cases with back in the late 2000s. Still active, still sharp, and still owed me a favor. When he picked up, his voice was gravel. Ray Cole. Been a long time. You're supposed to be fishing somewhere. Not tonight, I said. I need eyes on a company server. Quiet eyes. He whistled. You asking me to risk my pension. I'm asking you to glance at a couple of metadata trails. Nothing more. Call it a retirement courtesy. He grumbled, cursing me under his breath, then agreed. By dawn, I had confirmation. Derek and Leah had been moving company invoices through dummy accounts. Shell companies. False vendors. Tiny amounts. Nothing flashy, but steady and deliberate. Skimming. The mistress wasn't just the other woman. She was his partner in fraud. That's when everything shifted. I wasn't just building a domestic violence case anymore. I was staring at something federal. Embezzlement. Fraud. Racketeering if the threads pulled wider. It raised the stakes and it raised the danger. Men like Derek don't go down quiet when it's not just reputation at risk but prison time. When I told Hannah, she froze. Her face went pale, her fingers tightening around the mug of tea I'd made her. So it's not just about me, she whispered. It's always about you, I said. But yes, he's got more to lose in his marriage. And men with everything to lose, they are dangerous. Her lip trembled. What if he comes after the kids? I leaned forward, made my voice steady, unshakable. Then he'll find me waiting. But Hannah, this is where we stop playing defense. We go on offense now. By the book. Every page. The plan had to change. Step 1. Safety first. I called Mike and told him we needed a patrol swing by Hannah's house twice a night. He didn't argue. We added a camera system. Cheap Amazon order, but effective, and I made sure she never traveled alone. Step 2. Widen the net. I briefed Sarah Chen, the prosecutor. She leaned back in her chair, her sharp eyes narrowing. If what you're saying is true, Ray, this isn't just my office anymore. This could escalate to financial crimes, even federal jurisdiction. Which makes him easier to corner, I said. Because domestic violence, he'll deny, but fraud leaves a trail. She didn't disagree. Step 3. Control the narrative. Derek's lawyer had been playing smear tactics, seeding lies online. I suggested a counter, subtle, legal, nothing libelous. Sarah drafted a press-ready statement. The state is investigating evidence of both domestic violence and financial misconduct. We urge patience as the process unfolds. Just enough to plant doubt in Derek's allies. The midpoint came to life 2 weeks later in the most ordinary of places, a grocery store. Hannah was buying milk when she froze in the aisle. Derek was standing at the end, casual as if nothing had happened, smiling like the devil. You can't hide forever, he told her, loud enough that 2 shoppers turned their heads. Those kids are mine. That house is mine. You're nothing without me. For the first time, Hannah didn't shrink. She looked him dead in the eye and said, clear and steady, no, you're nothing without control, and you've lost it. She walked past him without flinching, milk in her cart, her back straight. He stood there, red creeping up his neck, fists clenched, and for the first time, I swear, I saw fear in his eyes. That was the moment I knew the tide had turned. Not because of me, because of her. But victories never come clean. That night, as I was organizing evidence, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. A voice, low and calm. Stop digging into the company, Cole. You don't want this fight. Click. The line went dead. I sat there with the phone in my hand, staring at the dark screen, the old detective instincts roaring awake in my chest. This wasn't just Derek anymore. This was bigger. Someone else was protecting him. And that meant my daughter's fight had just become a war. I left the grocery store that afternoon with a cooler of groceries and a file folder that felt heavier than it looked. The folder held the photos, the hotel receipt, the printouts of email headers Patrick had pulled, and the little plastic bag Rodriguez had sealed with a torn blue fiber. I kept running my thumb along the edge of the folder like it was a talisman. I drove to Parkland first. The same nurse met us in a quiet room, fluorescent light humming, antiseptic smell thin in the air. She photographed Hannah under standard protocol, close-ups of the throat, the lip, the eye, every angle labeled with a time and date stamp. The report would be entered into the hospital system as asterisk chart the 2nd of August, 2022, 5:12 a.m., assault evaluation star. Hannah answered the questions like a professional witness. I watched her breathe through it. The nurse swabbed for DNA, bag samples, sealed them with a chain of custody sticker that read, in small black type, Cola Hale, Evidence Kit Pound 5271 star. That sticker made me breathe a fraction easier. From Parkland, I went to the county clerk's office on Commerce Street. The ex-party affidavit sat on my lap like a loaded promise. I'd written it the night before, a plain statement of facts, timestamps from the photos, a clear assertion of imminent danger. The clerk folded it, stamped it with a round, wet seal, and a time. Asterisk 08/02/2022, 10:14 a.m. Filed star. The judge's assistant called us into a small room. The judge read the affidavit, scribbled a few notes, and signed. The paper had the judge's signature, a case number signed in neat blue type, DF 2022-0812. The temporary protective order was immediate. Derek had to stay 500 feet away from the family home and surrender any firearms. We walked out with a copy in hand and the knowledge that the law now had weight behind it. Mike and Rodriguez kept moving like the well-oiled machine I'd hoped for. They photographed the bedroom scene, took swabs from the dresser corner, and logged each item into evidence. Each item got a tag, asterisk evidence number 001, torn fabric, evidence number 002, blood swab. 3:22 a.m. sampled the asterisk Rodriguez's phone pinged as he uploaded secure folder to the department server. The timestamps matched the photos I'd taken at my kitchen table earlier. 3:20 a.m., 3:22 a.m., metadata intact, nothing missing. That kind of tidy chronology is ugly for defendants and beautiful for prosecutors. Patrick sat across from me in a faded diner booth 3 days later, his laptop open like a small fortress. He'd pulled header records from Derek's corporate email and traced payments through shell vendor accounts. He'd framed everything carefully. No hacks, no illegal grabs, just subpoenas to the company for account statements and vendor contracts. Sarah Chen liked what she saw. She filed a motion to issue subpoenas. The clerk stamped those too. The subpoenas compelled bank records and vendor contracts to be produced. When the bank faxed over the first batch of statements, the pattern was there: small payments, vendor names that led nowhere, deposit routing numbers that fed into companies with no websites. We had forms in triplicate, police incident reports, hospital charts, sworn affidavits, protective orders, and subpoenas. I signed where required, initialed lines, and watched clerks stamp each paper until the room looked like a paper storm. The little administrative fees were dink and dent amounts, $15 here, $25 there, but they were the cost of moving the machine. We kept receipts. Asterisk receipt hash A092, filing fee $18. Dallas County Clerk, the 2nd of August, 2022, 10:16 a.m. Hannah sat with the prosecutor and answered questions at length. Each answer she gave became part of the official file. She let the DA's office obtain phone records. They matched the call logs Patrick had flagged. Every piece fit into an evidence mosaic. I watched the mosaic form and felt my old confidence swell. Not the swagger of a badge holder, but the steadier thing that comes from methodical proof. We did not brag. We did not leak. Sarah issued a short statement to the local paper, measured, neutral, a notice that charges were under consideration pending production of financial records. The smear merchants quieted a little. Hard evidence is a way of being louder than rumor. On the morning the warrant dropped for a search of Derek's office, I was in the squad car 2 blocks away. I watched as officers in plain clothes move through his workplace, pulling files, photographing ledgers, and handing items to evidence techs. The team from a federal financial crimes unit had arrived quietly, nodding to Mike as if to say, "Asterisk, we read you, star." When the courier returned with a sealed box of seized documents, I felt a lightness I hadn't known in weeks. And yet, after the initial rush, after the arrests and the sacks of paper evidence, the case entered the slow, grinding gears of process. Depositions, discovery fights, motions to suppress over chain of custody technicalities, the defense filing for continuances. Men with money and lawyers know how to make calendars move. Courts of rhythms that can lull the sharpest wounds into long-term aches. I thought the heavy lifting would be the initial proof, photographs, DNA, the hospital report. I thought the rest would be routine. I was wrong. For a while, it looked like we'd nailed it. The protective order was in place. Derek was barred from the house. The hospital file sat safely in the DA's hands. Sarah Chen, sharp as glass, told us we had a clean case with teeth. For the first time in months, Hannah slept through a night without waking from nightmares. The kids laughed more. Even I let myself breathe. I thought we'd crossed the finish line. But arrogance is a way of crawling back. 2 weeks after Derek's arrest, his attorney filed a motion to dismiss, claiming fabrication and exaggeration by a vindictive spouse. That word, fabrication, lit like kerosene on gossip. By the next morning, a local blog ran the headline. Ex-sheriff's daughter accuses husband. Court papers question credibility. The story spread like wildfire. Facebook groups in Dallas suburbs chewed on it, spitting out armchair judgments. At Hannah's school, parents whispered at pickup. One mother she'd known for years stopped waving altogether. "I told you it wouldn't be simple," Sarah said, her voice steady but tight. "He's playing dirty." Dirty was an understatement. Derek had money and a mistress who suddenly painted herself as a friend worried about false allegations. Diane Russi gave an interview to a podcaster, her voice syrupy and false, saying Hannah had emotional issues and liked to dramatize fights. The podcast racked up 10,000 streams in a day. Hannah saw it while waiting in the pharmacy line at CVS. She left her prescription on the counter and drove straight to my house, shaking, humiliated. "Why won't they believe me?" she asked, her voice breaking. Why is her word louder than my bruises? I didn't have an answer. The backfire didn't stop there. Derek's lawyer filed a civil countersuit, defamation. It was absurd on its face, but strategically cruel. The goal wasn't to win. It was to drain us. To make Hannah question every court date, every dollar spent. The day the summons arrived by certified mail, Hannah crumpled in my kitchen chair. I can't fight this forever. Dad, I don't have the strength. His winning. He always wins. Even Mike, usually steady, admitted over coffee at a diner. He's got good counsel, Grover. They are buying him time. Sometimes time is enough. And then the worst blow landed. One evening, Sarah Chen called, her tone clipped. Grover, you need to prepare your daughter. The preliminary hearing judge just ruled the hotel receipt inadmissible. Chain of custody technicality. Defense argued the private investigator didn't log it properly before handing it off. Judge agreed. The receipt was the anchor, the proof of the affair, the catalyst for Derek's rage. Without it, the narrative looked shakier. Yes, we still had bruises, photos, testimony. But the clean arc that betrayal led to assault was blurred. I sat in my truck outside Hannah's house, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened. The glow of the dashboard clock read 11:17 p.m. I thought I'd built this case like a fortress, every brick in place. Now one brick was gone, and the whole wall wobbled. That night, Hannah called me at midnight. Her voice was low, afraid. Dad! He drove past the house. Twice. The kid saw the car. My chest clenched. The protective order should have been enough. But should have is paper. And paper doesn't stop a man who thinks rules are for other people. I realized then, I'd been looking at the wrong problem. It wasn't just about gathering evidence anymore. It was about understanding Derek's pattern, his arrogance, his need to control, his willingness to twist systems until they bent his way. If I wanted to win, I couldn't just lean on procedure. I had to shift, to see the fight from a different angle. That was the night I stopped waiting for the system to work on autopilot, and I started planning again. The morning after Derek's late-night drive-bys, I sat in my study with the blinds drawn and the case file spread across my desk like a battlefield map. Photos, affidavits, court filings, every piece of paper hummed with weight. But something was missing. Something obvious, hiding in plain sight. I went back to the beginning, the way I had when I was on the force. Line by line, date by date. At 3:20 a.m., photos of bruises. At 10:14 a.m., the protective order stamped and sealed. At 3:45 p.m., interview with Rodriguez. Everything was tidy. Too tidy. Then I noticed it. Buried in the stack was a copy of Hannah's phone record from that night. Routine evidence Sarah had pulled. The incoming calls matched what Hannah remembered. But one detail snagged my eye. A text, timestamp 2:58 a.m., just before Hannah arrived at my door. Sent from Derek's number. It read, "She's on her way to you. Keep quiet." My pulse jumped. Who the hell was that for? I cross-checked the number it had been forwarded to. Not Diane's. Not a friend. It was a disposable prepaid line, registered under a shell company address. The kind of burner people used when they didn't want their names tied to ugly business. I grabbed Patrick the tech from the diner later that day. He scanned the metadata, chewing his lip. Grover, this isn't just Derek covering his tracks. This line's been active for months. Look. He turned the laptop toward me. Message logs. Payment pings. All routed through the same shell vendor Derek had been funneling money into. I leaned closer. So what does that mean? It means he wasn't just having an affair. He was running money, steady amounts, to someone tied to that number. And the kicker? That prepaid line was used to call your daughter's school twice. Once last November, once in March. A cold weight dropped into my gut. What the hell would he be calling the school for on a burner? Patrick didn't answer. He just slid the screen to me. Caller ID logs. Both calls made right before parent-teacher conferences. Derek hadn't been calling the office. He'd been calling someone inside. And that's when the puzzle flipped. Diane wasn't just a mistress. She was also on the payroll through the same shell vendor accounts Patrick had tracked. She worked in Derek's company's HR department. Every time Hannah tried to lean on her job stability, Diane had access to her records, salary, insurance, schedules. She'd been feeding Derek information for years, making sure he always had the upper hand. It wasn't random cruelty. It was calculated, coordinated. I sat back, the old detective instincts roaring awake. He weaponized a fair use and not just a betrayal, but as an inside agent. That's how he kept Hannah boxed in. Patrick nodded grimly. That prepaid number ties them both. If the DA sees this, it's conspiracy to intimidate and financial fraud. You don't just have domestic violence anymore. You've got federal charges in the making. I pressed my palms into my eyes, the weight of it pressing down. All those years Hannah thought she was crazy, imagining how Derek knew things he shouldn't. It wasn't paranoia. It was surveillance. Betrayal laid with betrayal. When I told Hannah later that evening, she went pale. Her hands trembled on the mug of tea she held. So she wasn't just laughing at me, she whispered. She was helping him destroy me. She was getting paid to, I said. My voice came out like gravel. For the first time in months, anger sparked in Hannah's eyes instead of fear. Then we use it. Every shred. If he wants to play dirty, fine. But we've got truth on our side. That was a pivot. The case wasn't just Hannah versus Derek anymore. It was Derek and Diane versus the law. Their own arrogance had left fingerprints in bank statements and burner records. And those fingerprints were exactly what the DA could use to make everything stick. Sarah's reaction when I laid it on her desk said it all. She flipped through the logs, the burner receipts, the vendor payouts. She didn't smile, but her eyes lit. Mr. Sims, you just handed us conspiracy. That changes everything. For the first time since the night Hannah had stumbled onto my porch, I felt the ground tilt our way. Now I knew exactly where to stand, and exactly how to bring him down. The following 2 weeks moved like a chess game played in fast forward. Every document I gathered, the photos, the affidavits, the burner phone logs, the shell company invoices, was now in Sarah Chen's hands. She worked them into a single, airtight narrative that wrapped Derek and Diane together like twine around a package. Domestic assault, witness intimidation, conspiracy to defraud, and an authorized access to private records. This wasn't a messy he said she said anymore. This was numbers, timestamps, metadata, sworn statements, and a protective order already in effect. On a warm Friday morning, just after sunrise, we sat at the DA's office in downtown Dallas. Hannah's hands trembled only slightly as she signed the final witness affidavit. This one's different, Sarah told her. This one's not just about you. It's about the way he used systems to keep you small. We're charging him with everything we can prove. That afternoon, the judge signed off on a warrant that allowed investigators to seize Derek's personal laptop, 2 external hard drives, and bank records under federal statute. The order read like a grocery list, but to me it was a victory flag. Mike and Rodriguez coordinated with the Financial Crimes Unit. At 6:30 a.m. Monday, plainclothes officers served the warrant at Derek's apartment. No battering rams, no screaming, just quiet, professional authority. They left with 3 boxes of files, 2 laptops, and Diane's work phone. By noon, Diane herself had been served with a subpoena to testify before a grand jury. That same day, Sarah filed a motion to freeze the joint accounts Derek had been quietly draining. Because Hannah had documented every withdrawal and her attorney had prepped the paperwork, the freeze hit before Derek could move another cent. Child support payments were automatically redirected through the state's collection unit. No loopholes. Hannah watched the email notification come in from the attorney's office, accounts frozen per court order, and sat back in her chair at my kitchen table. She looked dazed. It's like the floor stopped shifting under me. It's what happens, I said, when you stop asking and start enforcing. The next blow landed from Diane herself. Faced with perjury charges and no promise of protection from Derek, she walked into Sarah's office one Thursday afternoon and signed a corporation agreement. Her statement confirmed every detail we'd suspected. She'd been on Derek's payroll for consulting, which really meant feeding him Hannah's work schedules, health insurance info, even doctor appointments. She admitted to calling the school on the burner phone to check on Hannah's hours, and then relaying it to Derek so he could time his accusations. It was a betrayal Hannah had long felt but never proved. Now it was ink on paper. Diane's attorney negotiated a plea, probation for her, testimony against Derek. The following week, Derek was indicted on 3 counts: domestic assault, conspiracy to intimidate a witness, and wire fraud related to the misuse of shell vendors. The indictment read in neat black print, "The State of Texas versus Derek Hale." When the bail hearing came, Derek stood in the dock looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. The judge read the charges, eyes flat. The protective order was made permanent pending trial. His bond conditions barred him from leaving the state or contacting Hannah or the kids, directly or indirectly. The wire fraud count drew a low whistle from someone in the gallery. Even Derek's own attorney looked pale. Hannah didn't go to that hearing. She sat in her classroom after the final bell, grading papers, trying to live her life. I went instead, sitting in the back row like any other spectator. When Derek's eyes flicked up and found me, they were full of something new. Not rage, not arrogance. Just a slow realization that the systems he'd bent were now bending back on him. Outside the courtroom, Mike clapped me on the shoulder. "You built a textbook case, Grover. Clean and by the book. That's why it's sticking." I exhaled slowly, a year of tension leaking out. For once, the book worked. Over the next month, as the pre-trial hearings played out, Hannah began to reclaim her life. She moved back into the house after it was repainted and the locks changed. She enrolled Alex and Lily in a summer soccer camp. She returned to therapy, not because she was broken, but because she wanted to understand her strength. Meanwhile, Derek's attorney tried every trick in the book. Motions to dismiss, discovery delays, accusations of bias because of my former badge. Each was denied. Sarah's filings were crisp, surgical. Mike and Rodriguez's evidence logs were flawless. Diane's testimony sealed the story. She described Derek's hands around Hannah's throat, the payments, the burner phone. When the plea offer came, a deal to avoid a longer wire fraud sentence, Derek took it. On a cool morning in October, he stood in front of Judge Elena Vargas and pled guilty to domestic assault and wire fraud. He accepted a sentence of 3 years probation for the assault, restitution to Hannah for the stolen funds, mandatory completion of an offender program, and a felony conviction that would bar him from carrying a gun or holding certain jobs. The wire fraud plea triggered a federal review. His passport was seized pending completion of his sentence. It wasn't prison, but it was a real, public consequence, and it was enforceable. When the gavel came down, Hannah sat beside me in the gallery. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just breathed, deep and steady, like she was inhaling her own life back into her lungs. Outside the courthouse, she turned to me. "I thought revenge would feel like fire," she said. "But this feels like water, like washing something off." "That's because it's not revenge," I told her. "It's justice, and it's yours." The next day, she took the kids to the park, just because she could. No burner phones, no secret payments, no man parked at the curb making them wonder. Just a mother, her children, and a warm Texas afternoon. I stood at the edge of the playground, watching her push Lily on the swing while Alex showed off his soccer kicks. Hannah laughed, an unguarded laugh I hadn't heard in years. It sounded like freedom. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't a movie ending. But it was clean, lawful, and complete. Derek had been exposed by his own paper trail. Diane had flipped. The court had spoken. And for the first time in 8 long years, my daughter's life belonged only to her. Now came the ripples. The story wasn't over yet, but the power had shifted for good. The courthouse air still clung to us the next morning, even as Hannah tried to go about her day like normal. She brewed coffee, packed Alex's lunch, tied Lily's shoelaces, all with a kind of deliberate calm, as if routine could anchor her after the storm. But the ripples came fast. Within a week, Derek's name hit the Dallas Morning News crime blotter. The wire fraud charge made it newsworthy. Local logistics manager pleads guilty in conspiracy case. It wasn't front page, but it was public. His employer cut ties the same day. An HR email confirmed his resignation effective immediately. Word spread fast across LinkedIn, and Derek's once polished profile sat empty, endorsements quietly disappearing. Hannah didn't gloat. She sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone, whispering, "So this is what it feels like to be believed." But vindication didn't erase everything. Some neighbors still avoided eye contact at the grocery store. Whispers lingered at the school drop-off. One parent muttered, "Messy business," as Hannah walked past. Stigma sticks, even when truth is proven. Financially, the restitution order helped. The court mandated Derek pay back over $27,000 siphoned from joint accounts and shell transfers. Monthly checks arrived through the state's collection unit. Sterile envelopes stamped office of the Attorney General Child Support Division. They weren't generous, but they were reliable. Diane faded from the spotlight. Her corporation deal bought her probation, but she lost her HR job and quietly left Dallas. Last I heard, she was working a cashier shift in Fort Worth. Hannah didn't ask after her. Some betrayals don't earn curiosity. The biggest fallout was emotional. One evening, Hannah stood in her front yard while the kids played tag. She looked at the house she'd once called a cage and said softly, "It feels different now. Same walls, same rooms, but it doesn't belong to him anymore." She started repainting the bedroom herself, soft sage green instead of Derek's harsh gray. Every brushstroke was a reclamation. The kids helped, splattering paint more than spreading it, but the laughter filled the space with something Derek could never touch. For me, the consequence was quieter. Old colleagues stopped me in diners, some patting my shoulder, others warning, "Careful, Ray, you stirred a hornet's nest." But I didn't regret it. I'd spent a career watching victims silenced by procedure, and this time, the procedure had sung for us. Still, the system isn't magic. Hannah carried scars that no ruling erased. Nights when she woke in a cold sweat. Days when she still checked locks twice. Justice isn't a cure, it's a boundary. And just when I thought it was settled, when I thought the ink on the court orders marked the end, something small shifted. A letter arrived in the mail, stamped with a law firm seal. Inside, a single page, notice of custody modification hearing, petitioned by Derek Hale. The fight, it seemed, wasn't finished. The letter burned a hole in Hannah's kitchen table. I read it twice, then a third time, hoping I'd misinterpreted it. But the words were plain as daylight. Derek Hale hereby petitioned for modification of custody rights. After everything, the guilty plea, the probation, the restitution, he wanted more than visitation. He wanted the children. When Hannah came home that evening, she spotted the letter before I could tuck it away. Her face went pale, but instead of panic, a strange steadiness took over. "He doesn't want them," she said flatly. "He wants me trapped." It was true. Derek had never changed a diaper, never sat through a school play, never packed a lunchbox. This wasn't about fatherhood. It was leverage. If Hannah feared losing Alex and Lily, maybe she'd bend. Maybe she'd soften toward him. But Hannah wasn't the same woman who had shown up at my door 1 year ago, battered and broken. "We'll fight it," she said, her voice trembling but sure. The court date was set for late March. In the weeks leading up, Hannah worked with her attorney, Sarah Chen, the same sharp-eyed prosecutor who'd secured Derek's conviction. Sarah was blunt. He'll spin it as rehabilitation. He's in therapy, paying support, complying with probation. Judges love redemption stories. But we've got the truth and the kid's best interests. Hannah nodded, scribbling notes furiously. I could see the fear beneath her determination, but this time she was armed. The morning of the hearing, the air in the Dallas courthouse felt colder than usual. Hannah wore a navy blazer, hair neatly pinned back. Alex and Lily were with my sister, spared the tension of the courtroom. Derek entered in a suit too big for his slimmer frame. His eyes darted around, finally landing on Hannah. He gave a practice smile, the kind of grin that once charmed neighbors and bosses. It didn't work anymore. Judge Vargas presided again. Familiar, unflinching. "Mr. Hale," she said, scanning the file, "you're petitioning for joint custody, is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor. I've turned my life around. I'm in counseling. I've complied with every court order. My children deserve a father." Hannah's attorney rose. "Your Honor, the children deserve safety. They witnessed years of emotional abuse. They saw their mother's injuries. They know what fear feels like. Stability matters more than appearances." The judge leaned forward. "Do you have evidence that Mr. Hale continues to pose a risk?" Sarah clicked the projector. Photos appeared, fresh ones Hannah had taken just last month. Alex drawing at the kitchen table, Lily practicing cartwheels in the yard. Normal life. Healthy. Then side by side with a hospital photo from the night of the assault. "This is the contrast," Sarah said. This is what's at stake. These children flourish under their mother's sole custody. Returning them to a man convicted of strangling their mother in their own home would be an injustice, Your Honor. For the first time, Derek's composure cracked. His jaw clenched. That's exaggeration. She's poisoning them against me. Judge Vargas's eyes sharpened. Careful, Mr. Hale. You're on thin ice. The courtroom went still. When the ruling came, it wasn't long. Petition denied. Custody remains sole with the mother. Supervised visitation continues as previously ordered. This court will not gamble with the well-being of two children. The gavel struck. Final. Hannah exhaled so hard her shoulders sagged. She turned to me, eyes wet but shining. It's over. Really over this time. I squeezed her hand. No, sweetheart. It's just beginning. Because that was a twist Derek never saw coming. Hannah had finally learned she didn't need rescuing anymore. Spring arrived in Dallas with its usual contradictions. Storms one day, blue skies the next. For Hannah, though, the season brought consistency for the first time in years. No more late-night panic at the sound of footsteps. No more checking her phone in dread. Just routine, quiet, and growth. The custody fight had drained her, but the judge's denial gave her a sense of permanence. Derek couldn't pull the strings anymore. He was reduced to scheduled, supervised visits at a neutral facility, a sterile room with puzzles, a staff member observing, and cameras rolling. Hannah didn't even have to see him. Staff handled drop-off and pick-up. I thought the kids would be devastated, she admitted one evening while we sat on her porch, sipping iced tea. But they're okay. Better than okay. She wasn't wrong. Alex was thriving on the soccer field, proudly wearing his YMCA team jersey and practicing drills in the backyard until dark. Lily had joined a dance class, tiny tap shoes clicking across the hardwood, her giggles carrying through the house. Kids are resilient, I said. They bounce back faster than adults. Hannah tilted her head. Maybe, but I think they bounce back because they can see I'm okay now. That was true. The bruises had long faded, but more importantly, so had the shame. She moved through her days differently, straighter posture, steadier voice. By June, she'd finished repainting the entire house. No more Derek's dull grays. Now the walls bloomed in sage, pale yellow, and soft blues. The living room smelled faintly of lavender from the diffuser she'd bought on clearance. It was her house, her rules, her sanctuary. And she wasn't just reclaiming the house. She was reclaiming herself. She signed up for night classes toward her master's in education, telling me with a shy grin, I've always wanted to teach at the college level. Why not now? She also started cooking again, not rushed dinners to keep a man satisfied, but real meals she enjoyed. The first time she brought over a peach cobbler, she laughed when I took a second slice. Dad, she teased, don't make me start rationing it. Her humor had returned, soft but genuine. The biggest change, though, was David. He wasn't flashy. He didn't bring grand gestures. Instead, he showed up with patience and small act of kindness, fixing a leaky faucet without being asked, helping Alex with a school project, sitting through Lily's entire dance recital with flowers she picked out herself. One Saturday afternoon, Hannah introduced him to me formally over barbecue at Lockhart Smokehouse. He extended his hand, eyes steady. Mr. Sims, he said, I want you to know, I don't take lightly the trust she's placed in me. I studied him for a long moment. No arrogance, no performance, just sincerity. Finally, I shook his hand. Don't make me regret it, I said. He smiled slightly. I won't. Watching Hannah's face that day, relaxed, unguarded, I knew she finally believed in the possibility of healthy love again. Derek's shadow still lingered in small ways. A letter came once in July, written from some halfway house program he joined as part of probation. Hannah didn't open it. She dropped it straight into the shredder, the whirring blades chewing it into strips. That's the last piece of him I'll ever let into this house, she said calmly. And I believed her. By August, exactly 1 year since that night she'd knocked on my door broken and bruised, Hannah hosted a picnic at White Rock Lake. She laid out a blanket, unpacked sandwiches, laughed as the kids splashed in the shallows. For the first time, it didn't feel like survival. It felt like life. She leaned against me, watching the sunset paint the sky. "I never thought I'd get here," she whispered. I kissed the top of her head. "You built this, Hannah. Every bit of it. And no one can take it away." This wasn't just resolution. It was reclamation. Her story no longer began with pain. It began with freedom. The sun dipped low over White Rock Lake, turning the water to molten gold. Hannah sat cross-legged on the blanket, Lily asleep against her lap, Alex chasing fireflies in the grass. For the first time in years, there was no shadow hovering, no voice to silence her laughter, no hand to bruise her skin. She was free. That word, free, echoed in my chest as I watched her. A year earlier, she had knocked on my door at 3 a.m., bruised and broken, whispering, "Dad, he hit me." That night had felt like the end. But in truth, it was a beginning. The beginning of Hannah taking back her power. The beginning of 2 children learning what safety looked like. The beginning of a family reclaiming joy, one slow, steady day at a time. Derek faded into the background like static, letters unanswered, visitation limited, his name mentioned only when legally necessary. He was no longer the center of her life. He was a footnote. And that's the thing about justice. It doesn't erase scars. It doesn't rewind the years of pain. But it draws a line. It says, enough. This ends here. For Hannah, that line was crossed with courage. She stood in courtrooms, told the truth, endured cross-examination, and rebuilt piece by piece. She didn't just survive Derek. She transformed beyond him. Her home now echoed with laughter, not shouting. Her table was full of friends, not silence. Her evenings were filled with books, classes, soccer games, and bedtime stories instead of fear. Most of all, she believed in herself again. And maybe that's the greatest justice of all. Not what the judge declared, not what the system enforced, but what Hannah chose. She chose to live, to heal, to rise stronger. So if you take anything from her story, let it be this. Silence doesn't keep you safe. Shame doesn't protect you. But truth, spoken even in a whisper at 3 a.m., can set everything in motion. It's never too late to knock on a door. Never too late to rebuild a life. Never too late to start again. Hannah did. And tonight, as fireflies blinked in the Texas dusk, I saw the proof. A woman who once asked, "Does he really love me?" now smiled with certainty, knowing she didn't need that answer anymore, because she had found a better one. She loved herself. If Hannah's journey moved you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. What part of her story struck you the most? And if you've ever faced your own battles, know this, you're not alone. Justice may come slow, but it comes. Stay strong, stay safe, and join me next time for another story of truth and resilience.